Hey, good morning and welcome back. It's President's Day, so we're not going to have court today. It's a state holiday, it's not a county holiday, so we're working. I told you last week we were going to do a little first. It was the first time that I'm aware of in 25 years that we've had 4 judges in 1 week. And I knew it was going to be hectic. It was. But we made the most of it, and we had a week-long murder trial. Walter Warriak started on Monday, and the jury came back after about 7 hours of deliberation. They came back Friday night at 8:30 with guilty. Now, Walter Warriak had killed Pam Vereen, and what we didn't get into in trial is that Pam had been a witness in the state's case, and she ends up getting stabbed 81 times. She had her head beat in with a hammer. It looked horrible, and it was an unsolved case for quite a while. So there wasn't an immediate arrest, and we at Pam's autopsy, we sent her fingernail clippings into SLED to look for DNA. And of course the DNA was a ne'er-do-well named Walter Warriak. Now that doesn't mean that Walter Warriak did it, but it means his DNA is under her fingernails. And then we started looking and comparing that DNA with other stuff. There was a letter on the couch from a term of court, and it had a handprint in it, and that was Walter Warriak's fingerprint in Pam Vereen's blood on the couch. So it ended up being a very good DNA case, but it was unsolved, and that's an unfortunate thing. We get into this CSI effect, but the truth is, when a police officer goes to the murder scene and sees what's there, there is no back computer that you can put the fingerprint in or the DNA in. We were really fortunate that once the fingernail clippings came back from the autopsy, there's a system called CODIS, C-O-D-I-S, and that keeps up with all kind of prisoners' DNAs. Now, we can't ever tell the jury that, because it would mean that this person had been in prison, but his DNA was in the system, and that came back as a match. Then we had to take that and go and do a buccal swab, because the courts won't accept CODIS. So we had to do a DNA swab from within his cheek, send that, and a second DNA confirmed that that was Walter Warriak's, plus there was touch DNA on the hammer. So Walter was convicted and got life imprisonment. He tried to plea during the middle of the trial, and of course we can't keep we're here to be myth busters, but another thing is we can never keep a person from pleading, because really what they're doing is changing their plea from not guilty to guilty. And I can say, Judge, I don't want him to change his plea from not guilty to guilty. I don't want him to plead guilty. That's all on Walter. If he wanted to plead guilty, he could have at any time. Chris Dontel pled guilty during the trial, or when it was getting ready to get started with opening statements. So they can change their plea at any point. We can keep them pleading to the original charge, but Walter talked about pleading, didn't plead, and ended up getting convicted. The judge gave him life imprisonment. We used one of the other judges to try a domestic violence case, and we've got domestic violence as its own issues, because it's got quite a bit of psychology going on. In fact, in this case, the victim would not help us. She didn't want anything to do with the case, and she had been beaten to the point where she had a brain injury. and there's a lot of issues going on there, but her parent came in and helped her and testified. Her sister came in and testified. At the end of the day, Christova Nolan, 37, of Georgetown, was convicted of domestic violence, and he was given a sentence of 20 years in prison. So he will have to pull at least 85% of that before he is eligible to be released on parole. So at least 17 years on that sentence. You know, I told you there was 4 judges. So one did the murder trial, one did this domestic violence case, and then the other judge heard actually a trafficking and marijuana charge. Now, in that case, Judge George McFadden from Sumter came down and helped us to try that case. That was Jesse Bueno. And Jesse Bueno had ties to Washington State, and through those connections, he mailed back to South Carolina a lot of marijuana, and they used the mail system. I think it was FedEx, and they mailed this 17 pounds of marijuana back to his home in Horry. Of course, the police picked up on it at the airport with the dogs, and were able to make that case against him. Trafficking in marijuana, he ended up getting 3 years in prison. He didn't have much of a record, but that's 3 years on trafficking. And still to this day, for all of you that are hearing, the jails are packed with marijuana, people with possession of marijuana. It's untrue. There is absolutely, listen to me, no people sitting in prison on possession of marijuana charges. That is a myth that people are trying to feed you. This guy had 17 pounds. Try doing, dumbbells of 20 pounds. That's not for personal use. That would be illegal in every state, and he got 3 years. So he could have gotten more, but the judge gave him 3 years, and hopefully that'll curb some of that. We had a case that was to start this week, and it garnered quite a bit of news coverage. I'm sorry, it was to start March 3rd. But Terrell Alston, 20 years old, of Conway, he was actually 18 when it occurred. But the craziest thing, we'll post the video for you now, but he was speeding through Conway. The police didn't stop him for speeding. Then he ran a stop sign, or blew through a stop sign, and the police, Nick Cantino, who was with Conway police at the time, now is with Horry County, turned on his blue lights and siren. And as soon as Tyrell Austin pulled up at his mom's house, before his feet hit the ground, he started shooting at Nick Cantino. Unprovoked. It was the craziest thing you would ever see. The whole shootout was over in 8 to 10 seconds. It was, it should give you a whole new respect of what police officers do. But as he was firing into Nick Cantino's car, and Nick hadn't stepped out of the car either, he had turned, and when he turned, there was a bullet that had come through the headrest and through the seat. Just providence that he didn't get hit, but he returned fire on Terrell Austin and hit Austin at least 8 times. Terrell Austin went to the hospital, left the hospital and went to jail. He was set to stand charged on attempted murder. He pled guilty before his case was called to trial, and Terrell Austin got 20 years on attempted murder. He also had some other charges that ran concurrent with it, but he had THC and alcohol in his system. That may have been why he did what he did. He had weapons charges, all of that stuff. But that was a case that was supposed to start March 3rd, and Terrell Austin, who is 20, will be serving 20 years. And finally, we had another drug trafficking case. This was a plea. This young man was looking at 25, 30 years in prison, but he ended up pleading guilty. Jarrell Grant, 50 years old, of Myrtle Beach, pled to trafficking in cocaine. Brandon Lanier, just an incredible, I talked about him last time, but this case, he's made quite a name for himself. He's come in and had this case prepared for trial, and because he was prepared, Jarrell Grant ends up pleading guilty and gets 10 years in prison. Now, if he had gone to court and a jury had found him guilty, he was looking at somewhere between 7 years and 25 years, and then an additional 5 years for a weapons charge. So there were other stuff in there like failure to stop for a blue light, but he ends up getting 10 years in prison for trafficking. There was probably 80 to 100 other people that pled guilty. Certainly we can't go through all of them, but with 4 judges, we got through a lot of work. We kept everybody busy, and we'll be right back into it this week. So I hope if you are off, you have an enjoyable day. I know school's out, but if you do have to go in, hopefully it'll be an enjoyable week for you and not nearly as bad as having to take on 4 judges and about that many defense attorneys. Have a great week.